enabling everything that we just heard. So these are all critical things. And I often like to think about, the folks I work with think about, well, how can we find time to do all this? How can we go ahead and make a change and empower this? And so I kind of think of some things that you really need to have in place, or if you don't have in place, it's just going to make your life that much more difficult. It doesn't mean you can't accomplish some of the same things we talked about, which are critical, but the more you have that in place, the more you're going to be able to do, and the better the experience is to be able to put that learner in. And so, I mean, I think some things like, for example, responsive design. When that first came out, it was all about, oh, now I can take things on my mobile learning. And that is absolutely critical and very important in the approach there. But it's actually more than just that. When you start to have a responsive design, it doesn't allow the screen just to go ahead and change because you have a smartphone. It allows content to change and adjust and morph into different approaches. So, we're all used to traditional slide learning of, the page turns, et cetera there. But we see a lot of customers who are saying, hey, on demand when I need it. So you can, if you have a responsive design and you have the right tools to enable you to do that, you can take that same content and with a flip of a switch, put it into a searchable knowledge base, or like a Pinterest tile approach where the learner is choosing their own adventure in terms of what they're looking at and those nuggets or finding the information that they want. And that's one of the key things with responsive design and enabling them to go ahead and journey and find that information how they need it. And we're seeing a lot more customers develop a learning less traditional of that focus, or even hey, let's take a long course and call it micro by chopping up into small pieces there. It's really transforming and changing the way that content is approached. Some other keys that I found with that, and in terms of this, is, of course, accessibility. And really, the key thing when I think about accessibility is the approach called universal design. And it's the idea of, hey, I'm not just like retrofitting or making it accessible so everyone can learn. And we're really experiencing that, hey, there's a lot of folks out there that may have challenges or actually access content in different ways than we might expect, but we don't see that in there. And so the idea of universal design is just like that walkway up into a building. It has a ramp built into the walkway, so you can walk up the ramp or the stairs or glide it up there, roll up there or there. It's the same thing with universal design and approach. Fortunately, from a technology standpoint, more and more, all tools are starting to add in capabilities. And one of the key things I would say when you're looking at and moving towards that is that everything to do with accessibility in the tool, it should be part of the workflow. In the old days, and even in modern days today, if you wanted to add accessibility, it's something you have to click on a button, open up a new panel, open it there. So it's outside the workflow of your design. So you're really not thinking about it. It'd be like if you go to design a page, every time you have to add in text, you click on a button, then it opens another panel, you work on the text and then close it, which if you're old enough, you remember there was technology and that's the way it worked, but they quickly over time changed that. And that's sort of the change that we're starting to see in tools, is that workflow is part of the design. So you're not having to think about it after the fact or open up different windows and working with it. Some other things that I think from a design standpoint that really plays up here is the idea of reuse. And I've heard that term battered around a bit. And unfortunately, when I think of reuse, I think of, I have a piece of content, whether it's a graphic or a learning nugget or an objective, and I have it available in 3-4 different forms, maybe 5-10, because it applies to different areas or different approaches. I want to make it available for different learners. And then when I update it, it updates everywhere. And that's a huge, huge time saving. Sometimes people say reuse and they think, oh, it's in a central library and I can keep copying it. And that's great for the initial setup. But as soon as you go to change things, you have to redo that process every time. So it's very inefficient. But when you have that reuse, you can have things like one of our other folks that we were working with are modernizing their instructor-led training. And we think of, hey, if we're going to, well, instructor-led training will still be there. But what they've done is through reuse, they have multiple audiences that have similar material. talking about a particular piece of technology, but different groups have different specifics. So they're able to use those and then reuse pieces across it, but then each unique individual element is customized or adapted for that environment. And from a modern classroom standpoint, instead of using a traditional PowerPoint, which doesn't get updated or have to pass it around, they're centralizing that in an HTML5 format. Everyone has access to it. When they update it once, it gets updated for all the variations for it, and they can still use it in a presentation. But that same material can also be used for the learner and their students and their notes, or that same material can be used for an e-learning version. And then that author, again, doesn't have to spend the time, and we're able to meet them as a learner at their moment of need and the approach and design that they need. And I'd add in one third element to that, and really this is a big change, it's been growing over time, is the idea that, hey, in learning, we want to know and tie things back to those objectives. We want to be able to have adaptive learning based on what I know already. And our old technologies of SCORM, they've served us well, but they really don't help us move to that next level. And that's where XAPI has been developed. And that really helps support the back end of everything we're trying to do, because businesses and learners, they want to know that everything is being tracked in terms of performed, whether it's a classroom, like what people are doing in the classroom, and really having those nuggets so they can go ahead and work on it and the instructor can help them out individually, or it's how they're accessing the knowledge base that is not the traditional, I go through it, get my certificate on there, but that doesn't mean they aren't learning and accomplishing those things. So having technology that doesn't require, again, the author to program in JavaScript and do all these things, but it's automatic and it's actually part of the flow. And maybe it's still sending SCORM information and XAPI at the exact same time, so we don't have to, have a cutoff. And with technology there, it's, gets back to that ease of maintenance. But, and if you are changing technology, to look for, there are ways to actually take existing libraries of content and mass transfer it into new technologies too. So I like to think of how can we empower everything we discussed there and make it more efficient to actually go ahead and meet those modernization approaches.